Welcome back. Hope you are all staying healthy and surviving the COVID apocalypse. When COVID first hit, I thought I was going to have so much time to catch up on reading and just some extra creative things I like doing. Turns out, no. I've never worked harder in my life, and a lot of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. But here we are in August, and I finally have some time to sit down in my personal library and tell you what I've been reading lately. So I see our intro swirly thing coming, but I want to remind you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hurry before it's too late. I don't know why I'm sharing my reading list with you guys. I mean, my conceit is that if you're spending time catching up on your YouTube subs, then you're, not reading as much as you know and I know we all should be reading. But let's be honest, this really isn't about books per se. When people share their reading list, they're basically saying, here's what I'm learning lately. Here's what I'm trying to teach myself. So these lists may not exclusively have books on them. I mean, this one does, but the future ones may not exclusively have books on them. So, one last thing. If you buy any of these books, just enjoy it. No one's sponsoring this video or paying me in any way to recommend these books, but if you want to pay me to recommend books, all the money goes to the church. It's a tax write-off. Think about it. Think about it. First of all, I'm listening again to the audiobook of Dune. I love audiobooks. I own nearly 200 of them. I've read Dune before, but I returned to it for 3 reasons. First, the movie is coming out, so I need to remember the events of the book so I can speak snobbily to my friends about why the movie stinks. Second, I'm writing an audio drama podcast about Adventists in space, and I need inspiration. And finally, I tried Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, and I just couldn't get into it. Dune succeeds where I think all good science fiction succeeds, in creating a kind of sandbox environment for you to explore different human possibilities, right? It puts you in situations you're probably never going to be in here on Earth in the real world. It helps you in this new strange situation to kind of think through, how would you live? How would you think about these things? How would you believe about these things? And so that's basically what Nathan did in the Bible when he told King David the story of the rich man who went and killed the poor man's sheep, his neighbor's one sheep, so he could feed his guests. It was only when David was invited to imaginatively step out of the real world into this imaginary world and then look back at the real world. It was only when David was in that situation that he could see his life through metaphor, that he understood clearly and admitted that he had done wrong. And I think that's what powerful, well-written fiction can do for us. I like how Dune takes up the question of a post-technological humanity, where we're focused on human improvement over technological improvements. There was a sense in Dune that technology betrays us in the end. I like how it shows us the ways that our environment shapes us, how the desert shapes theology. It shapes the people's views of death and technology. The Fremen of the desert believe that when you die, your water, which means most of you, because most of you is comprised of water, that it belongs to your people. Your water belongs to your people. And the implications of that horrify me when you think about that. But it's also interesting to think about why that horrifies me. Why does that offend me? What are our funerary customs, and why do we kind of treat them as if this is the one way of burying people, of grieving people, and so on? Anyways, I think fiction is important for me as a pastor, in particular because, let's be honest, the theological books we were made to read in college and seminary are not known for their creative command of language. We have to expose ourselves to creative writing if we want our own writing and speaking, our own communication of ideas to be improved. So good fiction allows us to find new metaphors, which we can use in teaching the stuff that we believe in conversing with others. The next book is a series of books by Rick Perlstein on the history of America's political turn to the right. It's a series of books, as I said. It begins with Barry Goldwater and his latest book, Perlstein's latest book on Ronald Reagan, is coming out this month, just a few days. And I'm super excited about that. I love it when you find like a good series that's still being written and then you get to join everybody in anticipating the latest volume. Pearlstein is excellent at giving us a good picture of the politics, the social movements, the economic ideas, the philosophical ideas, the cultural landmarks that all work together to create the world we know. Now, that's really my interest in this series. It's not about where I align politically. It's just about understanding the political, cultural, economic world that I live in and how it's been shaped over the past few decades. I really enjoy that, especially because the 1960s were never the decade that I really cared anything about. But as more than one person have said, I'm coming to realize that it's always 1968 somewhere. It's like we're still dealing with the 60s and the themes and ideas that it introduced even today in our modern society. Next up, How Not to Be Secular by James K.A. Smith. This book is really a fascinating distillation of the ideas of Charles Taylor. I don't usually like books like these that are just here to kind of paraphrase or distill somebody else's ideas. I'd rather just go straight to the source and just read Taylor. But as Taylor is way beyond my reading level, I'm appreciative that Smith has taken up the task of translating Taylor from English to readable English, specifically for Christians. The central question in this work is, how did we get from the Middle Ages, where the default theological position was to be a Christian, to the 21st century, where the default is increasingly some kind of agnosticism? Why did the world become secular, and all of us with it, right? Even Christians, even theists, have been pulled into this secularizing of the world. And if that isn't $1 million question, I don't know what is. So really, I'm reading this book. I love this book in trying to understand why the world has turned out the way that it was. And it turns out that a lot of the stories people are telling about secularization, that it was inevitable, we get rid of God and we can make all this technological progress, is a bunch of nonsense. So you'll find out why when you read the book. Finally, I've been reading The Edges of Seventh-day Adventism by Lowell Tarling. It's basically a study of groups that have splintered off from the Seventh-day Adventist Church from 1844 to 1980. And in that sense, it's kind of a bit dated. In discussing the Branch Davidians, for instance, Tarling notes how a young David Koresh was having an affair with a church leader. And I just wanted to be like, oh yeah, that guy's story is only just getting started, right? Because Waco is about to happen in the 90s. But he didn't know that at the time when he was writing this book. Anyways, again, it's a bit dated, but I think it's a helpful comparison to understand these various groups for 150 years, which have been breaking off of Seventh-day Adventists. Look at some of the reasons why. Is there like a trend of groups that break off for the same reasons? Some of the recurring themes about why they left and what they did after they left? Well, this is not the whole story of my reading. Left out are a bunch of great articles and other books that have started and paused, and then I come back and pause. You know how that goes. So I'm going to give honorable mention to Peter J. Leithart's Solomon Among the Postmoderns, which I think is from 2006, and Ronald Graybill's Visions and Revisions, which is kind of a short ebook about how Ellen White revised her accounts of her visions and how the writing process and all that kind of stuff. Reading is self-education. I think of it kind of like tunneling. I could just drill like narrow and deep. A small drill bit would get pretty deep pretty quick, but it doesn't create a very stable tunnel. So I have a focus on a particular subject, but I'm also developing some supporting subjects to kind of help keep the tunnel structurally sound. In this case, I want to understand this secular shift we are experiencing. That's my focus. But I'm also reading Dune to stretch my conceptual muscles, to acquire better metaphors, better ways of explaining things. And the Pearlstein books, I'm reading those to understand the political shift that's been happening at the same time as this secular shift and how they interplay. And of course, studying those splinter groups that have left Adventism from 1844 to 1980 also helps me see how things are changing religiously over a long period of time. So on the surface, what seems like 4 very different random topics is really one main topic: studying change over time in philosophy. Obviously, I'm not a philosopher. Studying change over time in philosophy, politics, and religion. And then there's that one supporting topic, good science fiction, which helps me understand and communicate what I'm learning a little better. So, what are you reading? What are you trying to learn right now? What are you trying to teach yourself? What kind of knowledge are you trying to acquire? Where are you trying to grow? Like, in what direction are you growing? Let me know in the comments below. Keep reading, keep learning, keep becoming the best person that you can be, knowing full well that as you become the best person that you can be, the best is yet to come.